Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today I'm going to do my review of AEW's Dynamite. Before I even get started in the review, man, this was obviously the first Dynamite of the new year. And honestly, for what it's worth, man, Tony Khan came out with a bang. Obviously, we get the introduction of the Undisputed Kingdom, which I will go over here shortly. My thoughts on that. Obviously, Orange Cassidy, Dante Martin for the International Championship as well. Solid matchup. And then we also get the debut of Mariah May. She makes her AEW Dynamite debut. We also go over a Christian Cage segment as well. Darby Allin versus Takeshita was probably one of the best matches of the night last night. And then we also get a new number one contender for Eddie Kingston's new Continental Championship. So let's get into the review, man. We have Adam Cole coming down to the ring with the Devil's Henchman, the entourage, if you will. Number one, Cole gets a new entrance theme, which I think is absolutely awesome. It has a lot of similarities to the Undisputed Era kind of theme song that he had in NXT, in my honest belief. Cole gets to the ring, grabs a microphone. He mocks the fans. He also mocks MJF. He says that MJF is a narcissist and also had a stranglehold on the AEW locker room. Cole says that MJF needed him, not the other way around. Cole also mentions the Undisputed Kingdom, which is now looks like the new name of his stable. Cole also gives congrats to Samoa Joe for winning the AEW title off MJF. He also mentions that Wardlow will be going after the AEW title, and that once Wardlow wins the belt, Wardlow then will give the belt to Adam Cole. Wardlow kind of smiles, and looks like there might be a confrontation in the near future with Wardlow being an issue for the Undisputed Kingdom. After that was mentioned, Jay White is on the stage with a microphone. He mentions when he was attacked by the Devil's Henchman. After that, he is joined up with the Gun Club. They rush the ring to attack the Henchmen. The Acclaimed are also here as well, and they also attack the Henchmen as well. So it looks like this whole storyline with Adam Cole, man, it's going to start heating up here relatively soon. To me, honestly, the announcement of the Undisputed Kingdom, I think, is absolutely awesome. And I mentioned this last week, too. This might be something where, they can easily slide in Kyle O'Reilly into the stable. I know he's trying to return back to AEW or return to in-ring action. I think it fits perfectly with Kyle O'Reilly to join up with the Undisputed Kingdom. And I'm all for it, man. I think this stable is going to be absolutely incredible. I think, Adam Cole's mission statement was that this stable was going after gold. You got, obviously Mike Bennett and Matt Taven winning the Ring of Honor Tag Team Championships off of MJF. So they are now the new Ring of Honor Tag Team Championships. Looks like Roderick Strong is going to go after the International Championship with Orange Cassidy, and then you have Wardlow going after Samoa Joe's AEW World Championship. So I'm all for it, man. This is something that we got, it might not be completely the same, but similar to what we got with Undisputed Era in the NXT Black and Gold brand. I'm all for it. And Adam Cole being a heel is just, he's a better heel, Adam Cole, than a babyface, in my honest opinion. So I'm all for this. Definitely excited to see what's going to happen next. It looks like the Undisputed Kingdom are going to have their hands full with the Gun Club or Bullet Club Gold and the Acclaim. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Moving on from that, we go into our first official match of the night. It is Orange Cassidy defending the International Championship against Dante Martin. I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Cassidy and Dante Martin, with Cassidy keeping the pace of the match. Cassidy then hits a Stundog Millionaire on Dante Martin. And then Orange Cassidy ultimately hits an Orange Punch on Dante Martin, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match and still International Champion is Orange Cassidy. After that, Private Party's music hits. And Private Party comes down to the ring, and it's it's actually Mark Quinn. Mark Quinn's been out for a while. Isaiah Cassidy and Mark Quinn, they come down to the ring. Mark Quinn's been out of action for quite a while. Mark Quinn grabs the microphone and says the tag team division is lacking. It's not as good as it once was, and it looks like Private Party is going to go after the AEW Tag Team Championships. A couple things I want to say about this. Number one, I'm excited to see Private Party back. Isaiah Cassidy and Mark Quinn teaming up once again. Like I said, Mark Quinn's been out for quite a while with AEW, I think due to injury. Honestly, I'm excited, man. What Mark Quinn was saying last night was 100% spot on. The AEW Tag Team division right now is lacking a lot. And hopefully, with obviously Private Party is not going to completely change everything, but to have them as an addition to go after the AEW Tag Team Championships, I'm absolutely all for it. Hopefully Rey Fenix gets healthy and he comes back, and him and Penta join up as the Lucha Bros once again and go after the AEW Tag Team Championships as well. To bring a little bit, limelight back into the AEW Tag Team division that, has the talent. It just hasn't been as exciting as of late. I know there's a lot of fans out there of Ricky Starks and Big Bill. And I mentioned this a lot, in the past about Ricky Starks and Big Bill. I think they're doing great as AEW Tag Team Champions, but at the same time, too, I think both of them need a singles run, especially Ricky Starks. Ricky Starks is not a tag team wrestler. To me, he's a singles wrestler, and he could be going after the TNT Championship or the International Championship, or, any belt for that matter at this point. So I think eventually I do see Ricky Starks and Big Bill splitting up as a tag team, and then both going their separate ways, and Ricky Starks obviously going on a singles run. So, all in all, though, it was great. It was great to see Private Party back in AEW. Like I said, Mark Quinn's been out for a while, so it was great to see him back. And, Mark Quinn kind of putting the AEW Tag Team Division on notice, saying that they are going to go after those AEW Tag Team Championships. They called out FTR. They even called out the Young Bucks, who have been off TV for quite a while now. So, hopefully we get to see Matt and Nick Jackson back into the fold here with AEW relatively soon, because they do need the Young Bucks as well back in AEW. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the debut of Mariah May. She's going up against Queen Amanita. I thought it was a decent match. It was a good showing by Mariah May, back and forth matchup. Mariah May hits a great Hurricane Rana in the middle of the ring. She was keeping the pace throughout the match, with Mariah May ultimately hitting the Mayday on Queen Amanita, pins her for the 3, and your winner of the match is Mariah May. After the match, she was approached by Renee Paquette to get an interview. Mariah May pretty much hypes up her match. She pretty much, talks about Toni Storm and hopes that Toni Storm was going to watch her match, but then she's briefly interrupted by the new signee of AEW. It is none other than Deonna Purrazzo. She is now all elite. She gets into the ring, gets face-to-face with Mariah May, and tells Mariah May to send Toni Storm a message that she's coming after her, and that she wants the AEW Women's Championship. Number one, great showing by Mariah May. It was a great debut by her. Obviously, she had a lot of work over in Stardom, and obviously, a lot of people might not be familiar with Stardom. But she had a great debut. I think it was a solid debut for Mariah May. Obviously, this is a storyline, like I mentioned to you guys about a month ago. This kind of has a lot of similarities between what we got in WWE years and years ago with Mickie James and Trish Stratus, where Mickie James was kind of that crazy super fan of Trish Stratus, and ultimately, they had a match, and Mickie James became the new WWE Women's Champion. This might be the same kind of story that we're getting between Mariah May and Toni Storm, which I'm all for it. Obviously, there's still work to be done with Mariah May, but, the sky's the limit for Mariah May right now. The biggest thing out of this, in my honest opinion, was Deonna Purrazzo. Deonna Purrazzo was a free agent. I know she was testing the market. I know some people were saying, she might go back to WWE, which I honestly didn't see that happening, considering what, her last stint in WWE didn't go so well, and it was short-lived. So, was I surprised by this? No, but I think it's a great addition to the AEW roster, especially the women's roster on AEW. But I had some small issues with this. One biggest issue, honestly, was, it's great to see Deonna Purrazzo in AEW. She's well needed in AEW, but the biggest thing for me moving forward, whether they bring in Mercedes Moné or anything else like that, is the direction of the women's roster on AEW. The creative behind it, if they're going to start pushing the women's roster like they should, and start building serious storylines. And hopefully going in now to this new year, Tony Khan does pay a little bit more attention to the women's roster. We start getting more storylines, more builds towards pay-per-views, and more, important matches for the women on the AEW, in the AEW locker room. And for what it's worth, I looked over the AEW's women's roster, man. It's stacked. It really is. Now you got the addition of Deonna Purrazzo. You have Britt Baker possibly coming back this year. Jamie Hayter coming back this year. We just got the return of Thunder Rosa. You can put Abaddon in the mix if you want to. Julia Hart, Chris Statlander, Willow. I mean, the women's locker room, Serena Deeb's also returning as well after being gone from injury. The women's roster on AEW is solid. It's stacked. So, I mean, depending on how the creative team handles the women's roster, I mean, it could be one of the best things coming out of 2024 this year if they handle it correctly and actually do storylines for the women and build up to these matches, especially for pay-per-views, and let the fans actually be invested and allow them to sink their teeth into a storyline when it pertains to the women's roster on AEW. So, again, it's great to see Deonna Purrazzo now being all elite. I definitely look forward to what's going to happen next with Purrazzo, but hopefully these are small signs to lead that AEW and Tony Khan are going to actually put more creative insight into the women's locker room moving forward. So I'm definitely all for that if that does happen. Moving on from that, we have a Christian Cage segment. Cage comes out to the ring. He mocks the crowd. He also talks about his historic run with the TNT title. He talks about the match he has with Copeland at World's End, that both of them probably left a piece of their soul in that ring that night. Cage also praises Nick Wayne as well as Nick Wayne's mom. And then he also mocks Adam Copeland, talks about Copeland's personal life and his family, especially his mom, and so on and so forth. So, to me, honestly, it looks like this whole Christian Cage, Adam Copeland thing's far from over. I do see another rematch between Cage and Copeland relatively soon. The whole thing too was during this segment, Luchasaurus was out there, or I'm sorry, Killswitch was out there as well with Nick Wayne and Nick Wayne's mom during this Christian Cage segment, and in the entire crowd were chanting Luchasaurus. So for me, at the time, I thought Luchasaurus might have turned on Christian and attacked him. I do see that possibly happening, which would be great for Luchasaurus or Killswitch. But that's not happening yet. But I could see it. I can 100% see it due to the fact of what happened at World's End when Luchasaurus won the contract for the TNT opportunity. And then Cage pretty much, told him to hand over the opportunity, which allowed Cage to retain the TNT title that night. So, again, it looks like there's a little hostility there between Killswitch and Christian Cage. Moving on from that, we have Darby Allin versus Takeshita. Again, this is one of the best matches of the night. It was a solid match, man. Back and forth matchup between Darby Allin and Takeshita. Takeshita was keeping the pace of the match. Darby goes for a tope to the outside, but he is met with a running knee by Takeshita. Takeshita then hits a German suplex off the ramp on Darby Allin. It looked absolutely brutal. Darby then somehow gets up, hits a stunner off the top rope on Takeshita. Darby then goes to the top rope, hits a coffin drop to the outside, taking out Takeshita. Darby then gets into the ring with Takeshita, hits a code red for a near fall. Takeshita then gets up, hits a avalanche German suplex. It looked absolutely brutal on Darby Allin off the top rope. And then Takeshita ultimately hits the finish on Darby Allin, pins him for the 3. And your winner of the match is Takeshita. Hats off to Takeshita for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It's a number 1 contenders match for the Continental Championship. It is Brian Keith versus Trent Beretta versus Brian Cage versus Vikingo. I thought it was a decent match. Back and forth matchup. Keith and Trent were both exchanging in the middle of the ring with Vikingo hitting a Hurricane Rana. Trent then hits a running knee. Cage hits a powerbomb for a near fall. Danhausen is here. He causes a distraction. Vikingo then hits a moonsault to the outside. Keith then hits a diving headbutt for a near fall, but Trent Beretta ultimately hits the finish. Pins for the 3, and your winner of the match and new number 1 contender for the Continental Championship is Trent Beretta. He will face Eddie Kingston this Saturday, on Collision for the Continental Championship. Couple things I want to say about this matchup, man, and this might be a hot take. To me, honestly, there was not a single person in this match to me that deserved an opportunity at this Continental Championship. And I know that might be a hot take for most people, but let me explain. There was a lot of people who were like, oh, Vikingo deserves an opportunity, deserves a title shot. Maybe he does. He's doing great things over there in AAA and CMML and stuff like that, and I get that. He's the world champion over there. That's great. Besides that, you bring in a guy like Brian Keith who, has a lot of potential. Sky's the limit for Brian Keith, but hasn't really done a whole lot to pretty much earn a title opportunity at this moment. He just got with AEW, and he's not really currently contractually signed to AEW, from what I understand, he's not all elite. Then you have Trent Beretta, which I have all the respect in the world for Trent, Beretta and what he's done with the Best Friends and, Roppongi Vice and stuff like that, and then, the body of work that he's put in. I'm not taking anything away from Trent Beretta. Brian Cage, again, solid wrestler, doing great things with the Mogul Embassy, obviously doing a lot of great things over in Ring of Honor. With that being said, you can't, just because they're doing so well in Ring of Honor, you can't slide them into Dynamite and say, you know what, we're going to get you a match opportunity for the number 1 contender for the Continental Championship. And I told you guys many times before, and my standpoint has been the same, and I'll die on this hill by myself. You need to keep that Ring of Honor shit over in Ring of Honor and keep the Dynamite stuff to Dynamite, and that's it. I don't understand the high praise that Tony Khan has for Ring of Honor. I don't get it. It is a dying brand. It's not going anywhere. There was rumors that, Tony Khan was using Ring of Honor in his back pocket to try to get them a TV deal. No offense, bud, you might not get it. It's a dying brand. There's even fans out there that are not really true fans of TNA. I'm not 100% the biggest TNA fan out there, but I'll say this. I'd rather had watched TNA right now than Ring of Honor. Hands down. TNA right now, and what Scott D'Amore is doing with TNA, is they're firing on all cylinders right now. 100%. And not only that, with them going back to the TNA name from Impact Wrestling, they're firing on all cylinders right now. They're bringing Okada in for a match in one of their pay-per-views. I believe it's next week for Snake Eyes or Hard to Kill. As well as Will Ospreay, who Ospreay is AEW talent. And Okada, for what I understand, is still a free agent. So, again, Ring of Honor Brands is not doing anything right now compared to other companies. And you're bringing in guys from Ring of Honor to be a part of this number one contenders match. It doesn't mean jack. It doesn't mean shit. It really doesn't. And I think to me as a fan, it's annoying. It really is annoying. And people are like, oh, well, Vikingo's a world champion. Yeah, he's a world champion in another company who hasn't really wrestled predominantly on Dynamite. Yes, he's been working with Tony Khan, but it's Ring of Honor. He hasn't done anything on Dynamite to give him an opportunity for a title shot. Neither is Brian Keith. Brian Keith has a lot of potential, but you only been with AEW for literally a cup of coffee. You haven't done anything with AEW to give yourself an opportunity at this number one contendership for the belt. Now, on the flip side of that coin, people might say, oh, well, okay, if not for these four guys, then who would be the new number one contender for Eddie Kingston? Not for nothing, I would probably put Jon Moxley in that conversation due to the fact that they had that finals, and maybe Eddie Kingston throws Jon Moxley a bone and gives him a rematch for the number one contendership for the Continental Championship. That's an idea. There's other talent that's on that roster right now that deserve championship gold. There's Swerve. Obviously, Swerve has a storyline did with Keith Lee until later on in the night. Obviously, Adam Page was there, but again, I don't see why these four guys deserve an opportunity for a number one contendership for the Continental Championship. It doesn't say anything to me, really. I don't understand it. I just don't. I have all the praise for Vikingo as well. Vikingo is a great talent. He's a great world champion. He's doing great things over in Mexico. I'm all for that. And I'm a big fan of what, Lucha Libre and stuff like that and CMML and what they do over there. I'm a humongous fan of that. One of my favorite wrestlers of all time is Eddie Guerrero. God rest his soul. But I love what they're doing over in Mexico as well. But at the same time, too, yeah, he is a champion over there. It might not speak the same volumes over in the States. It's just, it might not be the same. Maybe Tony Khan doesn't have that much praise for Vikingo and vice versa. Who knows? But in my opinion, this could have gone to someone else. This could have been a rematch between Moxley and Eddie Kingston. This could have been Bryan Danielson versus Kingston, Claudio versus Kingston. This could have been a whole other... It could have been anything but Trent Beretta. And I'm not trying to disrespect Trent Beretta, but my thing is are you really truly going to be invested in this match? The only thing that you're really truly going to be invested in my opinion, is Eddie Kingston's first title defense with the Continental Championship. That's it. And how far Eddie Kingston can go with that championship title, in my opinion. Am I going to be fully invested on this match on Collision? No. I'm not. I think for multiple reasons. One, it kind of writes itself. Eddie Kingston is not going to just win this championship and go through hell in this Continental Classic tournament just to drop that belt literally his first title defense to Trent Beretta. No, absolutely not. So again, to me, it would have been, okay, if it was Bryan Danielson, all right, well, it's going to be a solid matchup. Who knows? Trent Beretta versus Eddie Kingston. I have Eddie Kingston beating Trent Beretta. I'm sorry, but that's just my opinion. I'm not saying the match was awful. I'm not sitting here saying that. I just think these four gentlemen that were a part of this match for the number one contendership for the Continental Championship, these guys didn't need to be a part of this matchup. Not yet. Brian Keith, I have all the respect for Brian Keith. He's done really good things with AEW so far, but you have done absolutely nothing to give yourself an opportunity for a championship opportunity, in my honest opinion. The same thing goes with Brian Cage and Trent Beretta. What have you done to give yourself an opportunity at this championship match? Nothing. And I hate saying this too. I'm all for, tag teams and, one of the guys want to go on a singles run. But to me, unfortunately, Trent Beretta is not one of those guys. Trent Beretta, to me, is always going to be align himself up with Chuck Taylor as part of the best friends. It's going to be very hard for Trent to go on a singles run and everybody actually pay attention to Trent Beretta on a singles run. Because 9 times out of 10, you usually see Trent Beretta with Chuck Taylor, Orange Cassidy, part of the, Roppongi Vice, stuff like that, Rocky Romero. You don't really see Trent Beretta by himself. So, again, I don't have a whole lot of faith in Trent on a singles run compared to what he would be doing in a tag team run. And hopefully we get the return of Chuck Taylor or whatever. I don't know if he's injured. If he comes back into the fold, we get the Trent Beretta and Chuck Taylor, the best friends, and they go after the AEW Tag Team Championship. That, to me, makes more logical sense than Trent Beretta going on his singles run. But, again, hats off to Trent Beretta for getting the win. He's a new number one contender for the Continental Championship, and he will face Eddie Kingston this Saturday on Collision for the Continental Championship. Moving on from that, we go into our main event of Dynamite. It is Daniel Garcia versus Swerve. This was a solid match. Back and forth matchup between Garcia and Swerve. Garcia and Prince Nana have a dance-off ringside. Swerve then quickly attacks Garcia. Swerve then hits a Death Valley driver off the apron on Garcia. Swerve was keeping the pace. Garcia then applies a sharpshooter on Swerve on the announce table, but they both fall off, which I thought was kind of hilarious. Swerve then hits a Swerve stomp on Garcia for a near fall, but then Swerve ultimately hits the finish on Garcia, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Swerve. After the match, Paige comes out to the ring. Paige and Swerve get face-to-face, and then Paige and Swerve then both exchange in the middle of the ring, and they are pulled apart by AEW security. So it looks like the storyline between Paige and Swerve is far from over. Couple things I want to say about Dynamite, man, before I get out of here. Was it a solid Dynamite? Absolutely. This was a solid Dynamite from top to bottom. We get the return of Private Party, Isaiah Cassidy and Mark Quinn once again reuniting as Private Party to go after the AEW championship, AEW tag team titles. They call out FTR as well as the Young Bucks. I'm all for that as well. It's great to see Mark Quinn return to AEW. The other big thing was Adam Cole. The introduction of the Undisputed Kingdom. I'm all for it. And their game plan. Their game plan is that they're going to go after championship gold. You got Roderick Strong going after the international championship with Orange Cassidy. Obviously, Matt Taven and Mike Bennett are now the current Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions. And then you have Wardlow going after Samoa Joe's AEW World Championship. So I'm all for that as well. Then we get the debut of Mariah May, which I mentioned earlier. It was a great debut from Mariah May. Obviously, sky's the limit for her. And then we get the arrival of AEW's newest signee, which is none other than Deonna Purrazzo. She's now all elite. And it looks like Purrazzo has her sights set on Timeless Toni Storm, which I'm all for that as well. It's going to be a great matchup, possibly between Purrazzo and Storm. Darby Allin versus Takeshita, again, solid match. We have the Fatal 4-Way, which I talked about earlier for the number one contendership for the Continental title. Again, man, my standpoint on the Continental stuff has been this: it's not going to change. I mean, this match was decent. I just don't understand the logic behind the booking of booking these 4 guys in this matchup for a number one contendership for the Continental title. That's just my opinion. I'm not taking anything away from the talent that was in this match. I have a lot of praise for Brian Keith. I think he has a lot of potential, as well as Beretta, Cage, and Vikingo. I know a lot of people were upset. Some people were like, oh, well, I don't understand why Vikingo was in this match. I'm one of them. I'm all for Vikingo. I think he's a great talent. I think he's a great wrestler. But it to me, especially, and this is the thing, too, and people really need to understand this. AEW's, one of their biggest mission statements was rankings. Vikingo hasn't been on Dynamite that much to have a ranking on Dynamite. And my thing is they base it off Ring of Honor, and they base it, Ring of Honor, that whole thing with Ring of Honor, it truly honestly pisses me off. If I'm being honest with y'all. It really does. The Ring of Honor shit needs to stay on Ring of Honor. And I can't be more blunt than that, to be honest with you. I mean, at the same time, it gets to a point then you're putting more Ring of Honor shit on AEW than you are showcasing the talent you have on Dynamite. To me, Ring of Honor needs to be AEW's developmental. And honestly, for what it's worth, if we're going to look at AEW as a whole right now, and we're going to look at the entire entity of what AEW is, not for nothing, I would drop Rampage. I think Rampage I think it's ridiculous. It's a Friday night. It's at, 10 o'clock? It starts at 10 for an hour. Yeah, it's an hour show, but the show means absolutely nothing. There's no storylines being built on Rampage. It means nothing. I would solely focus. If I was Tony Khan, this is the type of stuff that I would focus on. Dynamite being my premier show and Collision. That's it. Dynamite and Collision, and then call it a day. If you want to do the 12 pay-per-views a year, which I don't know if it's going to happen this year or not, that's fine. But then if you're going to do something like that, then you need to focus on a streaming deal, whether it's HBO Max whether it is possible Paramount Plus. These are conversations that need to be happening now. Obviously, I know there's a lot of speculation around WWE right now. I know Triple H is supposed to make an announcement on Peacock tonight at 7 o'clock. A lot of people are saying it could be some kind of working relationship between WWE and TNA Wrestling. I don't know. I have no idea. But I'll say this, and I told you guys this about Ring of Honor and TNA earlier. I would rather watch TNA right now than Ring of Honor. And what Scott D'Amore and TNA are doing right now, I mean, they're firing on all cylinders right now. There's this whole rumor of the biggest signing ever for TNA happening here in the next week or two. Who knows who that could be, man? Honestly, at this point, it could be Mercedes Moné. It is definitely a possibility. I know when they were in the talks of adding Will Ospreay to TNA, they were throwing Will Ospreay 7 figures. So I don't know how much money Mercedes is asking for. I really don't. But it's definitely a possibility that she could show up on TNA. I'm not ruling that out. Not ruling that out at all. I think TNA as a whole right now, I mean, sky's the limit for TNA. And if you're a TNA fan, right now, I'd be super excited for the future for TNA, to be honest with you, because things weren't that great for Impact Wrestling at the time. And yeah, I will give credit where credit's due. Impact Wrestling was still keeping afloat, even through the pandemic and everything else like that, and they've still been around. And honestly, for what it's worth, it was another alternative besides WWE than AEW was. But they are firing on all cylinders. They really are. I mean, like I said, what D'Amore's doing over there with TNA, bringing the name back. There's rumors that the TNA pay-per-views now will be known as premium live events, and I think that's a lot of reason why people are talking about this possible merger maybe between WWE and TNA, which if that is the case, man, wow. That's big news. That's huge news considering the fact that, usually WWE doesn't really work with anybody else. And the fact that we could possibly see a merger between WWE and TNA, or at least a possible working relationship between the both, that's a big deal, man. It's a big deal. And honestly, it benefits TNA a lot. A lot. It gets more eyeballs on the product for TNA. It gets a lot more limelight on the product. It gets people talking, gets TNA some buzz. And, for what it's worth, man, I'm all for it. I told you guys before, I think 2024, as far as pro wrestling is concerned, man, is going to be insane. I genuinely believe that. I think it's going to be absolutely insane this year with the free agents, with the news that's coming out, and then you got The Rock returning on Monday Night Raw this past week for day one of Raw, and he's going after possibly Roman Reigns. So, I mean, even on both sides of the fence here, I know there's tribalism between both for a lot of people, but as a whole, man, professional wrestling right now is red hot right now. And you obviously got CM Punk over in WWE as well. WrestleMania 40 is looking incredible. So again, man, wrestling right now, it's truly in a renaissance at this point as a whole. But all in all, man, I mean, AEW last night, it was a solid show. It was a solid show. I know a lot of people were expecting possibly Mercedes Moné showing up on Dynamite last night, even myself included. I'm not going to rule myself out on that. I thought Mercedes might have shown up on Dynamite as well. I think when it pertains to Mercedes, you're going to have to wait and see until you believe it at this point, because anything is possible. It's a possibility that she might end up returning to WWE as well. She could be playing everybody and then returning or showing up during the Rumble. It's definitely a possibility for Mercedes. There's also, big rumors that Trinity Fatu, a.k.a. Naomi, is also returning and heading back to WWE as well. So maybe that's something that could bring back, Mercedes Moné into WWE with one of her best friends being Trinity, returning back to WWE as well. So, I mean, again, when it pertains to Mercedes, you're not going to know until you know. And I think we all should have that mindset right now. I'm never going to say never. I mean, you can say the exact same thing about CM Punk. No one thought that he would return to WWE, and he's back in WWE after being gone from WWE for 10 years. So, I mean, anything is possible. Anything. So, again, it's going to be a crazy year for wrestling. In AEW, the first show of the new year, in my honest opinion, my hat's off to Tony Khan. I mean, I think he pulled out a lot of good things coming out of AEW. I think the fact that he brought in Deonna Purrazzo into the women's roster, I think it's a great thing for that. But again, I will reiterate this, that if you're going to do something like this and bring in a talent like Deonna Purrazzo, then you need to put more time and faith and more creative, especially more creative, into the women's roster, because they desperately need it. Because the fans are looking for something they can sink their teeth into and be invested in when it pertains to the women's roster on AEW. Because right now, we're not getting it. The only thing that we're truly getting right now, and I mentioned this last week, when it pertains to the women's roster, is timeless Toni Storm. I truly believe Toni Storm is the only female right now that's putting that entire roster of women on her back in AEW and making it relevant, to be honest with you. I think that's a lot of praise for Toni Storm, and she deserves it. I think Toni Storm, is that woman that's putting AEW on her back right now when it pertains to the women in that roster. So hopefully, this is some signs leading towards Tony Khan and the creative team putting more time and effort into the women's roster. Swerve and Paige, again, I mentioned this briefly earlier. I think it's a great storyline. It was great to see Paige come back to Dynamite. I know he was not. None of the Elite were actually booked for, or not booked, but neither one of the Elite actually had a match on World's End, which I think that was like the first time ever, which was a big deal. It's great to see Paige come back. Obviously, the storyline between Swerve and Paige is now heating up again, and I'm all for it. I think it's great for Swerve. I think it's great for Paige, because at this point right now, there's really nothing left for Swerve until Keith Lee gets healthy. And who knows when that's going to be. It could be 6 months, could be 8 months, could be a year until he's healthy to come back. So obviously you're not going to put a guy like Swerve on the shelf or give him, ridiculous matches just to fill a void. You're going to put him in a storyline to have the fans, be invested. And right now, Swerve, he's one of the best things going in AEW right now. The fans are absolutely gravitated towards Swerve. Swerve's done some of his best work in his career with AEW, and the fans just gravitate towards both him and Prince Nana at this point. So you're not going to put a guy like that on the shelf to wait for a storyline. It's just not going to happen. But all in all, it was a solid Dynamite. But with that being said, this is my review of AEW's Dynamite. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.